and I actually hadn't heard about that before. But the principle that stood out to me was giving a story or example of the principle you're teaching. And so I'm actually taking a research methods class and a family advocacy class this semester. And so I think they kind of go along with a lot of what we're learning about. And so they talked a lot this semester about finding good research in order to do that, in order to give that example. And so like statistics and previous research results, they just add that merit to what you're teaching. And they're so important. And so we also talked about this last week, or the last few weeks, about balancing teacher and participant talking and teaching. And so I think, even the BYU Idaho learning model really talks about that. We have to have each of us, whether we're teaching a class or learning in a class, we have to be able to, we have to balance that. We have to play both roles in a way. And so I love that at BYU Idaho. And so in my lesson plan, I tried to recreate that. I tried to leave time at the end of each topic for participants to add comments and questions and to kind of share their point of view. And so let's see, another principle that I learned about effective instruction was addressing real problems. And so I like how the book talked about that. They talked about participants needing to see real life application for them. I think, like when we took math and stuff, a lot of people get frustrated with math because they're like, well, I'm never going to use this. How am I going to use this? How's it going to apply? And so I think that's the same with these classes. We have to, if someone's going to sit there for, I know for mine are 2-hour classes. If I'm going to have someone sit there for 2 hours, I better get them to realize the application in their life and get them involved in that, address their real problems. And so I also liked how we talked about the Holy Ghost a lot this week. And so even though we're not teaching gospel principles, some of us can teach it, like I'm teaching it to a lot of members of my Relief Society, but at the same time, a lot of times that's not going to happen. They're not going to be members of the church. But as I've been learning in my advocacy class, we can have that, the Holy Ghost testifies of truth. And even if that's secular truth, he can still testify of that and he can bear witness of that. And so we can still have the Holy Ghost in our family life education as we share true principles about, especially in regards to the family. And so what I want to incorporate from the CES handbook, there were a couple different things this week. But let's see here. Let me see. One thing it talked about was how the process that people learn, it says the process through which, with the influence of the Holy Ghost, a person acquires gospel knowledge, chooses how to respond to the knowledge, and then uses the knowledge in his or her own life. So I like that process. We can give recommendations about how to apply what we're teaching, and we can encourage them to apply the principles we're teaching them, but we can't force it. And so that's the same with the gospel and with what we're teaching too. They're very closely linked. And so building rapport and relationships with participants is huge too. We talked about that a little bit this week. And again, my advocacy class has really been linked with this class, I think, this week. And so we've been talking about telling different parts of the story. And the second part of the story that we're supposed to teach, I'll go into that in a little bit later, but it talks about telling how is the story of we, and so how it applies to both you and I, and how we're connected in this fight of whatever we're teaching, whatever we're trying to get participants to understand, we're in the fight together, I guess. That kind of builds that rapport there, I think. And of course, inviting others into the discussion, inviting others to share experiences of their own. Let's see, discussion mistakes. I think a big one for me is that I spend so much time preparing my lesson and stuff and try to memorize it and get focused on that. And sometimes I get so nervous that I forget to look at the audience and see when people may have questions or if they may have comments that they want to share. And so a way to avoid that this time is where I've actually written it into my lesson plan. Look to see if there are comments, look up to see if there are questions. And so that's something that I'm working on. And then again, something else that I wanted to apply out of the CES manual it talked about preparing to and teach with prayer of faith, and also practice principles of edification. And I think that still applies to family life education as we talk about, you know, and again in my family advocacy class, I'll bring that in a lot. I really like the combination of the two that I'm taking together. But we learned about having faith and prayer in our heart as we prepare to teach these materials, and that we can, even though we're not teaching church material, we can still have that foundation in our lives and that foundation in our stuff, and then we find that secular knowledge foundation and stuff, or I guess building blocks to build upon it to teach to others, but we still have that gospel faith in our heart as we teach it, and I think it makes us better teachers. And that's what that kind of stood out to me, is that as we have that prayer in our heart, it helps us to be better teachers, and we can edify others that way too, as we have that in our hearts, because we have the Spirit with us. And so, let's see. I'm going to skip around a little bit because I'm running out of time, but I think, how to improve the use of personal narrative. And so that's where I wanted to talk about. In my class this week, we learned about the 3 different parts of a narrative. And so first you tell the story of me, which is your personal story, and gets the reader hooked. It gets them to identify with you. And something that we learned was actually that as you tell that story, it actually, like, I don't know, how do I describe it? Like it kind of lights up the part of the listener's brain, and it gets them to connect with you. And so that's a huge part. That's what we learned about this week. And so the next step then is to tell the story of we. And that's where you get, share how it involves the learner and gets them on the same page as you about how you guys are actually having a similar experience, and gets them, connected. And then the last part is the story of now, which is, the call to action and what are we going to do with this, and where do we go from here? And so I think that also goes in, the one last thing that I wanted to share from this week was skilled dialogue. And it uses respect, reciprocity, responsiveness, and humility. And so as for a big thing that we've been learning about in my family advocacy class was that that we need to basically look at the opposite point of view. And I think that enables us to have that respect and be able to speak with another person, have that that skilled dialogue. So that's kind of what I wanted to share this week. I'm about out of time, so thanks guys. Bye.